In a world full of challenges and pain, there are stories that remind us of the strength of resilience and the power of love. On a quiet evening, as Officer Ethan patrolled the familiar streets, he suddenly spotted a young black boy wearing a blood-stained yellow shirt running frantically toward him. At first, Ethan thought it was just a regular street fight in the neighborhood. But when the boy pleaded for help, Ethan's face turned pale, realizing this was no ordinary incident. This is a story about courage, determination, and the relentless pursuit of justice to protect a family from deadly danger. Before we dive deeper into this story, let us know where you're watching from. And if you stand for justice, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, hit like, and share this story. The evening dusk settled over the quiet streets of Maplewood Heights, a peaceful suburban neighborhood on the outskirts of Chicago. In his patrol car, Ethan Miller, a seasoned officer with over 15 years of experience, slowly drove through the intersecting roads lined with thick trees. The last rays of sunlight filtered into the car, but nothing could distract him. Ethan's sharp eyes constantly scanned every corner, ever vigilant for anything out of the ordinary. As the car approached the intersection near Grand Avenue, a small figure suddenly emerged in the middle of the road, waving frantically. Before he could process what was happening, Ethan slammed the brakes, his heart tightening when he realized it was a young boy, no older than 10. The boy's clothes were dirty, his white shirt stained with blood, and his trembling hands and legs looked as if they were paralyzed by overwhelming fear. Without a moment's hesitation, Ethan leapt out of the car and rushed toward him. "Are you hurt?" His voice was urgent but steady, trying to remain calm. The boy looked at him, chest heaving with rapid breaths. His wide black eyes glistened, darting toward the nearby houses, as if expecting someone, or something, to emerge from the shadows. "Officer, you have to help me," the boy sobbed, his voice cracking. Each word came out broken, as if choked by terror. Ethan knelt down, placing a firm yet gentle hand on the boy's shoulder. "Take a deep breath, son. What's your name? What happened?" Ethan's voice carried a calm authority as he tried to soothe the boy's panic. The boy inhaled shakily, struggling to suppress his sobs, though his small hands continued to tremble. My name is Liam Harper. My parents, they were taken. We were playing in the yard. 3 men. They wore masks. They hurt my dad. He's not moving anymore." Liam's voice cracked, his wide, fearful eyes darting around. Tears streaked his dirt-smeared cheeks, and his small hands clung tightly to Ethan's arm, as if that was the only thing keeping him grounded. "They said they'll come back. For me." Liam's words hit Ethan like a punch to the gut. A shiver ran down his spine. This wasn't a typical street fight or a missing child case he'd seen before. This was far more severe. Something darker, more sinister, lurked behind the boy's trembling words. Ethan tightened his grip on Liam's shoulder, as if shielding him from the cruel world outside. "Liam, I'll help you, but I need you to stay calm, take deep breaths, and tell me exactly what you saw." Ethan's voice shifted to a firm yet reassuring tone. "Are you hurt anywhere?" Liam shook his head, his eyes filled with fear and unease. Although his body showed no obvious injuries, Ethan could see the deep emotional trauma etched in the boy's eyes. Pain far worse than any physical wound. The boy was trapped in a nightmare that even Ethan couldn't fully imagine. The flickering patrol car lights illuminated Liam's face, highlighting the sheer terror that gripped him. Ethan didn't waste another second. He turned, signaling to his team through the radio. His voice was clear and commanding. "I need immediate backup at Grand Avenue. This is an abduction case. We have an injured party." His gaze never left Liam. "We're starting the search now." Liam looked up at him, his tear-filled eyes sparkling with a glimmer of hope, though fear still loomed over him. The boy feared the danger was still nearby, lurking, waiting to strike again. Though he had found help, the shadow of terror clung to him, like a phantom refusing to let go. Ethan squeezed Liam's shoulder one more time before standing up, his eyes fixed on the row of houses ahead, where darkness seemed to be waiting. At that moment, he knew there was only one thing he could do: end the boy's nightmare and bring those responsible into the light. Without hesitation, Ethan opened the car door and carefully helped Liam into the passenger seat. The boy could barely sit upright on his own, his eyes reflecting nothing but sheer terror. Ethan said nothing more, simply starting the car and speeding off through the deserted streets. The engine roared, its sound merging with the rushing wind outside, but all Ethan could hear was Liam's labored breathing. The boy clutched the seatbelt tightly, his small fingers turning white, as though the fabric might tear under his desperate grip. Ethan kept his voice steady, though his heart was pounding. "Liam, do you remember anything about the men? What color was their car?" His tone was calm and low, yet the tension in his words was unmistakable. Liam stammered, his voice trembling uncontrollably. "A black truck. It was big. The windows were so dark, I couldn't see their faces." Each word felt like a blow to Ethan's chest. In his mind, fragments of images emerged: masked men, violence, chaos. He tried to piece together the scattered details Liam had shared, but nothing was clear enough. Even so, Ethan knew he had to stay composed, even as a storm of worry churned inside him. Taking a deep breath, Ethan worked to calm both himself and the terrified child. "You're brave, Liam, for running to get help," he said, his voice filled with reassurance. "We'll find your parents, I promise." As the car raced through the streets, an unsettling sense of urgency crept into Ethan's chest. He tried to hide it, but the dread was impossible to ignore. The narrow alley leading to the Harper family home came into view, isolated from the rest of the neighborhood. Towering trees cast thick shadows, enveloping the area in darkness. The Harper house, partially obscured by the dense foliage, stood quietly with its pale yellow walls and faint light glowing from the windows. The scene was unnervingly tranquil, so still it made Ethan's tension rise even higher. The front door was ajar, its hinges creaking softly in the gentle breeze. Ethan pulled the car to a stop and turned to Liam. "Stay in the car. I'm going to check inside." His voice was firm, leaving no room for argument. Liam remained motionless in his seat, hugging his knees tightly, his wide eyes locked on the house. His gaze was filled with dread, as if fearing the horrors that might lie within. Cautiously, Ethan stepped out, his hand instinctively resting near the gun at his hip. Each step toward the house was slow, deliberate. Every sound in the eerie silence heightened his senses. The living room unfolded before him, a chaotic mess. Furniture was overturned, chairs lay scattered, and dark red stains streaked the wooden floor, evidence of a violent struggle. The sight made his heart tighten, not because of the physical disorder, but because it confirmed that something terrible had indeed occurred here. Suddenly, a faint moan came from the direction of the stairs. For a brief moment, Ethan's heart froze. Without a second thought, he sprinted toward the sound, his boots thudding against the floor with a sense of urgency. Each step up the stairs felt like a countdown to the unknown. At the top, he pushed open the bedroom door and found Peter Harper, Liam's father, lying unconscious on the floor. His shirt was soaked in blood, his body eerily still, as though life had drained from him. Ethan dropped to his knees, his hands trembling as he checked for a pulse. He forced himself to stay calm, though dread gnawed at him. His heart skipped a beat when he couldn't find a pulse at first. But then, after a few seconds, he felt it, a faint, weak rhythm. He exhaled, relief flooding him, though Peter's condition was critical. Ethan knew he didn't have much time. Grabbing his radio, Ethan spoke with firm urgency. "I need immediate medical assistance at 148 Maplewood Drive. We have a victim with severe injuries. Emergency response required." His voice betrayed the strain he was under. Looking down at Peter, Ethan couldn't shake the haunting images of the attackers. These weren't just criminals, they were predators, and they had left their mark not just on this family, but on the entire community. Standing up, Ethan steeled himself. He couldn't afford to let panic take hold. Descending the stairs with determined steps, he glanced toward the car. Liam was still inside, his tearful eyes wide with worry, searching for any sign of hope in a world that had just turned so dark for him. Ethan closed his eyes for a moment, the weight of the situation pressing heavily on his chest. He had to find the ones responsible for this, and he wouldn't stop until he did. After the medical team took Peter to the hospital, Ethan stood in the middle of the devastated house, a place where life had been torn apart in just one unforgettable night. The silence hung heavy, suffocating, and the tension in the air mirrored the unease deep in Ethan's chest. His eyes moved restlessly, scanning for any clue that might lead him to the ones responsible for this nightmare. A cool breeze drifted in through the window, carrying with it an ominous stillness, while Ethan's thoughts raced uncontrollably. He walked slowly through the living room, his sharp eyes darting around, searching for anything that might help him piece together the puzzle of this mysterious crime. Suddenly, beneath an overturned coffee table, something caught his attention, a crumpled piece of paper, as though it had been hastily torn and discarded. Wasting no time, Ethan crouched down and picked it up. His heart sank as his eyes scanned the scrawled words. 500,000, no police, 48 hours, or you'll never see them again. Ethan's eyes narrowed, a chill spreading through his body. Everything seemed to spiral out of control in an instant. He clutched the paper tightly, his mind racing. The figure of 500,000 on his rang like an alarm in his head. But it wasn't the money. It was the threat behind it. These kidnappers weren't just causing harm, they were holding the survival of Liam's family hostage. Most chilling of all, they intended to operate in the shadows, forbidding any interference. Outside, the forensics team had begun their work. Technicians moved methodically, recording muddy footprints, collecting blood samples, and examining every trace that might identify the culprits. One of them spoke in a calm, measured tone. It appears the victim was dragged down the stairs after being injured. Blood trails on the staircase and at the base suggest this was no random attack. Ethan couldn't wait any longer. Time felt as if it were slipping through his fingers, every passing minute increasing the risk. He didn't have the luxury of waiting for more leads or additional resources. Quickly, he grabbed his phone and called his colleagues, requesting reinforcements and emergency protocols. Yet even as he coordinated the response, the image of Liam haunted him. Stepping out of the house, Ethan returned to his car. Glancing in the rearview mirror, he saw Liam's swollen, tear-streaked eyes, filled with exhaustion and fear. The boy sat motionless in the back seat, staring blankly into the emptiness around him. The sight pierced Ethan's heart. He understood the boy was gripped by overwhelming terror, not just from what had already happened, but from the helplessness of being unable to save the people he loved most. As Ethan opened the car door, Liam turned to him, his voice hoarse from crying. He whispered, barely audible, "Do you think we'll make it in time to save them?" Ethan looked into those fragile, hopeful eyes and felt the weight of the boy's fear, vulnerability, and the faint glimmer of trust he placed in him. "I promise I'll do everything I can to bring your mom and sister back," Ethan said, his voice steady, though doubt gnawed at him from within. This situation was unlike anything he had ever encountered in his career, but Ethan refused to let Liam see the uncertainty in his eyes. The boy needed hope, no matter how fragile, and Ethan wouldn't let that slip away. Liam didn't respond, his gaze remaining fixed on Ethan as if waiting for a sign, a gesture, anything to assure him that things would be okay. But Ethan knew there were no guarantees in this moment. Each passing second was a gamble, and all he could rely on was his determination to find the answer. Ethan turned back to his task, refusing to let fear consume him. He continued the journey in silence, praying that amidst the tension and uncertainty, some sign would emerge. Some small clue he could seize to help Liam's family escape this tragedy. With every step he took, with every moment that passed, the stakes grew higher. But Ethan knew there was no choice but to press on. When Ethan stepped out of the car ready to begin the investigation, he couldn't ignore the tension coiled tightly in the air, ready to snap at any moment. Every step, every passing second felt like a crushing weight on his shoulders. After the medical team rushed Peter to the hospital, Ethan and his colleagues returned to the scene, where Liam's lingering anxiety still haunted him. Ethan knew that if they didn't find a lead immediately, it could be too late. He and his team accessed the nearby traffic camera system, hoping to uncover something, anything that could guide the investigation. Each second ticked by in tense silence as their eyes stayed glued to the screens, watching every movement, every frame. And then something appeared. A black truck, just as Liam had described, speeding through an intersection not far from the Harper home. The truck headed toward the South Side industrial area, notorious for its abandoned warehouses and its eerie reputation as a place no one dared venture at night. A sinking feeling spread through Ethan's chest. He knew without a doubt that the kidnappers had planned this carefully. This was only the beginning. At the same time, a report came in from a nearby gas station. A suspicious man had stopped there shortly before the kidnapping. The man moved furtively, glancing around nervously at other vehicles before quickly getting into his own car and driving off, leaving no clear trace. The pieces of the puzzle began to fit together, painting a clearer picture of the individuals behind the crime. Ethan turned back to his team, his determination shining through his gaze. They had no time to waste. "We need to head to the Southside Industrial Area," he ordered firmly. Now, patrol cars lined up and moved swiftly, tearing through the empty streets. Every officer wore a focused expression, their silence filled with unspoken questions and unresolved tension. Each mile felt like a race against the clock. When they arrived at the industrial area, Ethan took in the sprawling expanse of crumbling warehouses, dirty walls, and dangling wires that resembled skeletal hands reaching out into the darkness. The area was eerily isolated, with barely any light and only a few rusted trucks scattered at the far end of the street. The scene felt ominous and haunting, but it was the perfect place for the kidnappers to hide. One of the investigators spotted a slight crack in the door of one of the warehouses. A faint light glowed from within, and shadows moved across the dim interior. The site resembled a massive trap lying in wait, but Ethan knew there was no turning back. He glanced at his team, his resolve unwavering. "SWAT team, get ready. Approach carefully. We can't let them know we're here." They were only one step away. Everything was unfolding rapidly, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. Each decision felt like it could trigger a cascade of events, altering the outcome of the entire mission. Ethan led the SWAT team, every step forward feeling like a countdown. Inside the warehouse, the kidnappers surely sensed that time was running out for them. They might already be preparing for a desperate, reckless move, and Ethan understood the high stakes. Without precise preparation, everything could fall apart in an instant. The dim glow of the warehouse lights illuminated Ethan's face as he signaled to his team. Fatigue etched lines on his features, but his eyes were steady, burning with resolve. Step by step, the SWAT team moved silently, their positions calculated and deliberate. Each officer knew the gravity of the situation and the need for absolute precision. The atmosphere grew more intense with each passing moment. Every faint noise, every shift in the air, heightened the already unbearable tension. Shadows flickered within the warehouse, hinting at movement, but nothing was clear. The suspense was nearly suffocating. Then a faint sound broke the silence. Ethan froze, his sharp eyes narrowing as he pinpointed its source. The kidnappers were moving near the door, seemingly unaware of the SWAT team's presence. Ethan gave the signal immediately. A flurry of footsteps erupted in the dark. The well-trained officers moved without hesitation, their actions swift and decisive. Weapons were raised, their determined gazes cutting through the dim light. Ethan and his team encircled the warehouse, ensuring no escape routes remained. The kidnappers' hideout was no longer a safe haven. It had become their trap. Ethan rushed toward the main entrance, refusing to allow even a single suspect to slip away. His mind focused on one goal: rescuing Liam's family before it was too late. His footsteps echoed against the hard ground, each one driving him forward with unrelenting urgency. He couldn't fail. Not now. When the SWAT team stormed into the warehouse, chaos erupted instantly. The heavy footsteps of the specialized unit echoed through the desolate space, breaking the eerie silence. Flashlights attached to their weapons cut through the darkness, illuminating the warehouse's long, jagged shadows, creating an atmosphere that was both ominous and tense. The entire area transformed into a battlefield, one filled with danger and palpable tension. Every passing second intensified the uncertainty, weighing heavily on everyone inside. Victor, the ringleader, realized his hideout had been compromised. He turned around sharply, his face twisting with rage, his hateful eyes locking onto the SWAT team. His movements were frantic and heavy as he dragged Sarah and her young daughter, Emily, in front of him, using them as human shields. Like a cornered animal, he showed no hesitation in his desperation to escape. "Back off, or I'll kill them!" Victor's voice cut through the air, sharp and threatening. He pressed a gleaming knife to Sarah's neck, its cold blade catching the glare of the SWAT team's flashlights, revealing a faint streak of red on its edge. Ethan, standing at the forefront of the team, felt every ounce of the tension settle in his chest. His breath quickened, his heart pounding harder with each beat. But he couldn't let fear cloud his judgment. One wrong move, and everything could spiral into catastrophe. Victor was clearly unafraid to take innocent lives. But Ethan also knew that if Victor felt cornered, he wouldn't hesitate to do something unimaginably violent. Keeping calm was critical. "Victor," Ethan called out, his voice steady and commanding, "let them go. No one needs to get hurt." His words were both a plea and a warning, a way to diffuse the situation and maintain control. But even as Ethan worked to stay composed, Victor smirked cruelly. The smirk quickly turned into a maniacal laugh, and instead of backing down, Victor grew more unhinged. His eyes glinted with madness, and the knife crept closer to Sarah's neck. Emily's tear-streaked face, pale and terrified, seemed to hang by a thread. The dimly lit warehouse felt suffocating, the air thick with danger and despair. Sarah, despite being paralyzed with fear, knew she couldn't afford to remain passive. She had no choice but to act, even if it was a desperate gamble. In the fleeting moment when Victor's attention wavered and shifted to Ethan, Sarah made her move. Summoning every ounce of strength, she jabbed her elbow into Victor's side with lightning speed. Victor stumbled back, caught completely off guard. Pain and shock momentarily robbed him of his control. And in that instant, the SWAT team seized their chance. With precise, rehearsed movements, the highly trained officers advanced, subduing Victor before he could recover. Their swift and forceful actions left no room for resistance. Within seconds, Victor was disarmed and restrained, along with the rest of his accomplices. The sudden noise of the takedown reverberated through the dark warehouse. Commands from the SWAT team filled the air as they secured the area and ensured no one escaped. The kidnappers, now subdued, had no opportunity to fight back. It all happened so quickly that the danger seemed to dissolve in an instant. Sarah, though now free, collapsed to the floor, clutching Emily tightly to her chest. Her breath came in ragged gasps, and beads of sweat glistened on her face. The fear hadn't left her. It clung to her, a cold and unrelenting memory of the blade that had been so close to her throat. Her wide eyes darted between the SWAT officers, filled with both gratitude and lingering horror. Ethan stepped closer, his eyes softening as they met Sarah's. He didn't speak, but the understanding and determination in his gaze said everything words couldn't. The SWAT team carried out their duties efficiently, but Ethan knew the emotional scars Sarah and Emily bore wouldn't heal overnight. Their nightmare wasn't over yet. It would take time to process, time to rebuild. Even though Sarah and Emily had been rescued, Ethan could feel the weight of the trauma that would stay with them. He understood that this wasn't just a small victory in the fight against evil. It was a reminder that no matter how many battles were won, the journey to protect lives and ensure justice was far from over. What had unfolded in the warehouse was only the beginning, and Ethan knew the road ahead would be long and grueling. But he also knew he couldn't stop now, not while there were still lives to protect and shadows to confront. Ethan stood in his office, the dim light of the desk lamp casting shadows over the scattered files in front of him. The words on the pages were chaotic and overwhelming, but his focus remained unshaken. Despite 15 years on the force, this investigation was unlike any other. It wasn't just the severity of the case, it was the way this criminal network had concealed itself behind a thick veil of power and wealth. After Victor's arrest, clues pointing to Trevor Blake began to surface. But Trevor wasn't the direct orchestrator of the kidnapping. He was just one piece of a much larger, meticulously concealed operation. Trevor Blake, a well-known businessman with extensive connections and lucrative contracts, stood at the helm of this criminal enterprise. Ambitious and calculating, he had used his position and influence to mask his illegal activities, deeds so sinister that few would have suspected him. Ethan couldn't stop thinking about the devastation Trevor had caused, the lives he had stripped of safety and happiness. Trevor wasn't just another criminal. He was the mastermind, and Ethan would not let him escape justice. Weeks of investigation, aided by colleagues and forensic teams, finally yielded undeniable evidence. Suspicious transactions, covert phone calls, and overlooked documents pieced together a dark portrait of Trevor Blake's operations. He had built a sprawling, transnational criminal network, from kidnappings to extortion, all cloaked under the guise of legitimate business ventures. His life of luxury and power hid the sinister machinations he controlled. When Ethan and his team discovered that Trevor was planning to flee the state on a private jet, the picture became clear. This wasn't just a kidnapping case, it was part of a much larger conspiracy. Trevor was the spider at the center of the web, pulling every string from the shadows. Ethan couldn't allow him to escape. On the day of the takedown, the tension was palpable. Ethan and the tactical team tracked Trevor's every move, preparing to apprehend him the moment he boarded his jet. Time felt frozen, and Ethan's mind was consumed by a singular thought: Trevor must be caught. Without hesitation, the tactical unit infiltrated the airport perimeter. Their steps were swift and silent, leaving no trace. Within minutes, Trevor was apprehended just as he was about to board his plane. The operation was flawless, executed with precision. With Trevor in custody, the investigation gained momentum. Though now in the hands of the law, Trevor refused to confess. Ethan felt his patience tested with each passing moment, but he knew there was no turning back. Trevor wouldn't escape this time. The courtroom was heavy with tension as the trial began. All eyes were on Trevor Blake, a man whose wealth and influence had once seemed untouchable, now laid bare as a criminal. Sarah, Emily, and Liam were present, their emotional scars still raw. Time hadn't yet healed the wounds they carried. Sarah stood before the court, her eyes betraying her pain and fear. She had lost so much and was now fighting for the justice her family deserved. Emily sat beside her, still visibly shaken despite her rescue. Liam, his young face etched with worry, stared intently at Trevor, his gaze filled with quiet rage. When Sarah spoke, her voice wavered but carried the weight of her ordeal. She recounted every horrifying detail: how she was taken, how Trevor and his men used her daughter as a shield. Each word, each tear rolling down her face was an unassailable testament to the suffering her family had endured. Liam's testimony followed, his account cutting through the courtroom like a blade. Their words didn't just reveal the truth, they struck at the hearts of everyone present, painting a vivid picture of Trevor's cruelty. The trial didn't last long, but the tension hung in the air like a storm. The jury didn't need much time to deliberate. The testimonies of Sarah, Emily, and Liam weren't just statements. They were evidence of Trevor's malevolence and the destruction he had wrought. When the verdict was read, the courtroom held its breath. Trevor Blake was sentenced to 20 years in prison for kidnapping and extortion. For a moment, silence filled the room before the gravity of the decision began to ripple through those present. Trevor, once a man who believed his power could shield him, now faced the consequences of his actions. Ethan stood motionless, his eyes fixed on Trevor. What he felt wasn't satisfaction, it was resolve. He knew this was just one small victory in a much larger battle. But for now, justice had prevailed, and that meant more than anything else. The Harper family had endured a journey full of trials and upheaval, but step by step, they had triumphed and found a new life. After the storm, they discovered light at the end of the dark tunnel. Peter, the pillar of the family, began rebuilding his career. The wounds inflicted by the days of fear and captivity gradually healed as he tirelessly worked to regain his footing. At the same time, Sarah, the resilient mother, and Emily, her young daughter, attended therapy sessions. These sessions not only helped them heal mentally, but also provided valuable tools to confront the pain of the past. They started anew, seeking a fresh life, and slowly the fears that once haunted them melted away like mist under the morning sun. As for Liam, the transformation was remarkable. From a frightened, timid child scarred by past events, Liam grew into a confident and resilient young boy. The dark memories of those harrowing days began to fade, replaced by bright smiles and dreams no longer clouded by fear. He found himself again, a testament to the fact that no matter how harsh life's circumstances may be, we can always rise and move forward with courage. Ethan, the officer who had silently watched over and supported the Harper family from the sidelines, noticed the change too. On his familiar patrol route, he would occasionally stop by to visit the family, not just out of duty, but because he knew that sometimes the smallest victories could hold the greatest significance. Ethan saw the recovery in their eyes, the sparkle of joy on Sarah and Peter's faces, and couldn't help but feel that his work, though often unseen, had made a profound difference. He realized that without the resilience of families like the Harpers, people like him wouldn't be able to accomplish much at all. On a sunny morning with warm rays of sunlight spreading across the peaceful neighborhood, Ethan's patrol car came to a stop in front of the Harper home. A familiar sight. Through the windshield, he saw Liam playing ball in the yard. The boy ran around, his eyes bright, a wide smile lighting up his face. Liam waved at Ethan, his eyes radiating pure happiness. Ethan couldn't help but wave back, a gentle smile forming on his lips. A sense of relief filled him. Every effort, every hardship he had endured throughout the investigation now felt like a passing cloud, blown away by the sight of Liam's joy. In that moment, Ethan understood that sometimes it's the smallest victories that carry the greatest meaning. Looking at Liam, Ethan didn't just see a boy who had overcome his fears. He saw a symbol of inner strength. Liam had conquered himself, and in a world full of challenges, that was an invaluable lesson for all of us to remember. Liam's story serves as a reminder that no matter how tough the circumstances, we can always find the strength to rise, to start anew, and to reach for something better. Each step Liam took was a testament to resilience and an unyielding hope that never fades. In life, there are moments when we feel tired, discouraged, and defeated. But it's the small victories, the simple and quiet moments like these, that drive us forward. Just like Liam, every time we stumble, every time it feels like the world is against us, if we refuse to give up, we'll always find a clear path ahead. And when we look back at what we've overcome, we'll realize that those challenges were the foundation upon which we built our strength. Standing there watching the boy play, Ethan couldn't help but wonder if, at times, he needed to learn from Liam too. The feeling was incredible, a mix of lightness and satisfaction as he saw a family not just recovering, but thriving stronger than ever after everything they had endured. In that moment, Ethan felt deeply that justice isn't only served in verdicts or sentences, but in the lives saved, the people who find light after darkness. Perhaps it's stories like this, those silent victories unseen by the masses, that hold the most meaning. While many chase grand achievements, it's often the smallest changes in life that can transform the world. With just one boy like Liam, one family like the Harpers, and one officer like Ethan, we are reminded that in life, there is no obstacle too great to overcome. Let the story of the Harper family be an inspiration to all of us. No matter what challenges you face, if you have faith, resilience, and the support of those around you, you can always start again, stronger than ever. If you found this story inspiring, don't forget to subscribe to Stories Best Tales. Hit like, share, and leave your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear about your small victories in life and the stories that helped you rediscover faith in yourself. Share them with us.